The coastal town of Windmere was known for its tranquil shores, where waves whispered secrets to the sand, and its lilac sunsets painted the sky in hues of serenity. It was the kind of place where time moved slowly, and memories lingered like the scent of salt in the air. For Emma Carter, however, Windmere held more than charm, it held the weight of her past. Emma hadn't returned to Windmere in nearly a decade, not since she was 18, and full of dreams that couldn't be contained within a small town. But when her grandmother, Margaret, passed away, leaving her the family's old seaside cottage, Emma knew she couldn't avoid the town any longer. She arrived in late spring, her car kicking up gravel as she turned into the familiar driveway. The cottage stood just as she remembered it, its white walls slightly weathered, the blue shutters faded by years of sun and sea air. The garden, once vibrant with wildflowers, was now overgrown, but it still held a quiet charm. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old books. Emma ran her fingers over the wooden banister, her mind flooded with memories of summer, days spent baking cookies with her grandmother and nights reading by the fire. But beneath the nostalgia lay something unresolved. Windmere wasn't just the place where Emma grew up, it was also where her heart had been broken. Emma hadn't been in town for more than an hour before she heard his name, Caleb Rivers. "Did you hear? Caleb's back in town too," said Mrs. Peterson, the town's busybody, as she handed Emma a bouquet of fresh lilacs from the market. Emma's heart skipped a beat, though she masked it with a polite smile. Caleb had been her first love. They had spent endless summer evenings watching the sunsets together, dreaming of a future that never came to pass. He had planned to stay in Windmere and open a boat repair shop, while Emma dreamed of becoming a journalist in the bustling city. Their dreams had pulled them in opposite directions, and their goodbye had been anything but graceful. Now, 10 years later, the thought of seeing Caleb again stirred a mix of emotions: curiosity, anxiety, and a tinge of anger. The encounter happened sooner than Emma had expected. She was at the town pier, watching the fishing boats return with their daily catch, when she heard a voice she couldn't mistake. "Emma?" She turned, and there he was. Caleb stood a few feet away, his dark hair tousled by the wind, his eyes as piercing as ever. He looked older, more rugged, but the boyish charm she remembered still lingered. "Caleb," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "It's been a while," he said, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jeans. "A decade," she replied, her tone cooler than she intended. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the sounds of the sea filling the space between them. "You're back," he finally said, breaking the tension. "Just for a while," she said, "to settle my grandmother's affairs." Caleb nodded, but there was something in his expression, an unspoken question, a hint of regret. Over the next few weeks, Emma found herself running into Caleb more often than she anticipated at the bakery, the library, and even the little cafe by the pier. Each encounter chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of lilac, Caleb knocked on her door. "I thought you might need help with the garden," he said, holding a pair of gloves and a spade. Emma hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Together, they worked in the fading light, pulling weeds and planting new flowers. As they worked, they talked tentatively at first, but soon, with the ease of old friends, Caleb told her about the years he had spent working on fishing boats, traveling the coast, and eventually returning to Windmere to care for his aging father. Emma shared stories of her time in the city, the articles she had written, and the loneliness that often accompanied her ambition. "I always thought you'd go far," Caleb said, his voice soft. "And I thought you'd never leave this town," Emma replied with a faint smile. One evening, Caleb invited Emma to join him on his boat. They sailed out just as the sun began to set, the water calm beneath them. "This was always my favorite time of day," Caleb said, leaning against the railing. Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "The lilac sky," she said. "It's like the world holds its breath for a moment." Caleb turned to her, his expression serious. "I've missed this," he said. "Missed us." Emma's heart ached at his words. "Caleb," she began, but he shook his head. "I know it's been years," he said, "and I know we can't go back." But being here with you now, it feels right. Like maybe we were never meant to stay apart. For a moment, Emma couldn't speak. She thought of all the pain, the years of silence, and the life she had built away from Windmere, but she also thought of the joy she felt in Caleb's presence. The way her heart seemed to find its rhythm when he was near. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Emma reached for Caleb's hand. "Maybe," she said softly, "it's time to start over." In the weeks that followed, Emma and Caleb began to rebuild what they had lost. They didn't rush, allowing the wounds of the past to heal naturally. Emma started writing again, inspired by the beauty of Windmere and the love she had rediscovered. By the time summer came to an end, the lilac skies of Windmere held a new meaning for Emma and Caleb. They were no longer just a reminder of what had been, they were a promise of what could be.